Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Sapience Institute Live. We're trying out some new technology today, so please let us know in the comment section if you can actually hear us, if you can actually see us clearly. We've connected this to another camera. So mashallah, there's quite a few people online. So please, in the comments, please put down 1 if you can hear us properly and you can see us properly. 2, if there's an issue in the hearing or in the actual video. So let's see what's going on. So far, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Brilliant, brilliant. All right, guys, what do you think we are going to be discussing today? Of course, we're going to be discussing the arguments for Islam, and we're going to be arguing not only in favor of Islam, but also we're going to be challenging the contentions which are put up against Islam. And I can already start seeing some comments. No, Hijab got rid of his hair. Why? And some other comments about Mr. Hijab looking dangerous. So let's first deal with the elephant in the room. How does it feel being 2 inches less taller than you are? Does it affect your self-esteem? Do you feel as if people are looking down on you now? Do you feel more intimidated?
It's a good point now, because when I had afro, especially when I put it out, I'd be walking. If the hair counted as my height, I'd be walking around at 6'9".
Not bad.
Which is pretty close to 7 foot.
Dealing
but
with
that's not my height. My height is 6'6".
Okay.
So yeah, there's actually a fiqh discussion on whether the hair is part of the body or not.
Right. Okay.
And obviously the fuqaha say the nails on the hair are not part of the body.
Okay. So so if you took the opinion that it was part of your body, do you think you would have lost, like, would it feel like you lost a family member with your 2 inch?
Do you know what?
It's almost like a little, it's like a little thing, isn't it? 2 inches of hair.
It's too much maintenance, man. It's a lot of maintenance, especially when you shower and it's all messed up, man. You know, I wanted to, do you know what? I'm a curious kind of guy, bro. I'm a curious kind of guy. I need to try things. We were just talking about traveling. You've been to 30 countries. You're kind of like that kind of adventurous guy as well. I'm the same. So I've always wondered how I look like with cane rows, single plaits, with an afro. You know, so I had to experiment.
Yeah.
You know, now that the curiosity or the itch has been scratched, we can move on to bigger and better things.
Okay. You ever thought about what it would be like if you had, I don't know, magpies living in your hair, or just different sort of species of birds? You know, you ever wondered that?
Yeah.
Just put some, you know, some. We're looking at this screen. We should be looking at that screen there, by the way. Yeah,
they can see.
They can see us. Right. Yeah.
Do you know what it is? I think that. What's your question again?
Well, the question essentially was about, you like to try new things out.
Yeah, man, you have to.
Why do you look shorter? Because normally you're much taller than me, even when you're sitting down. Is it just a slouch, or is it the hair?
Maybe a combination.
Okay.
Maybe a combination, man. Yeah, but the hair it's a mess, bro. It was too much but I enjoyed it. I might go back to it as well.
Okay.
You know, see how it goes.
So today we're going to be discussing, guys, not only a continuation from last week. We had some guests, and by the way, the guests that joined us last week, who we couldn't really address their questions, please come forward straight away. We'd like to speak to you. Essentially, what we're going to be arguing for today is all of the recent videos that we've been putting out on the Sapience channel in terms of Sapience thoughts. We're going to be looking at contentions that people can put out to these types of videos, and also how you would like to see Sapience to deal with the future issues. Now, you mentioned this in the last live stream, and I think it's worth mentioning again. What's the point of making this large library of refutations when there could be really good stuff out there? We don't really need to be producing it.
I reckon that refutations, just as with explanations, need to be renewed.
Okay.
We need to be, and the thing is, we have a careful blend, right, of interdisciplinary stuff. So we're trying our best to bring people from different specialisms to help us in research. You know, people that are good with science, people that are good with philosophy, the philosophy of science, and people that are good with Islamic studies, bring it all together and create mega libraries of refutation and explanation, and also trying to present a case for Islam. So all of that will be there in one place. And the aim is to have that centralized for everyone so that they can use it at their disposal. So someone comes now, like let's put this in a practical setting. Someone's in a school, in a university, in a college, at work, or whatever. And then you're going to have conversations with people about Islam and all these things, right?
Yeah.
So there's going to be the common objections that you're going to deal with. Or that you might want to explain Islam to someone, and there will be a common template, like the GoRap, for example. Now, but when people go into more depth, they're going to ask for more evidence. So we want to provide as much evidence as is consumable by an end user public, and is not too daunting for them at the same time. In addition to giving them a centralized location for videographic and a written textual refutational material on the objections of Islam, such that nobody really has a problem with being able to explain Islam and to answer the objections and to make a case for it. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to argue for the case of Islam, and we want to answer the objections against it. That's what Sapience Institute is all about.
All right, brilliant. So what we're going to do is we're going to get straight into it and start inviting guests. Just a small reminder for everybody watching. Please stick to questions about why Islam is true, and also the contentions against Islam. Anything to do with Islam's opinion on music, or Islam's opinion on all the other things that we were discussing last week on matters of Islamic jurisprudence or political issues or anything like that. We really don't want to talk about that. We really want to talk about why Islam is true and what are the arguments against Islam. We have our first guest, mashallah, Bosnian Muslim. Assalamu
alaikum.
How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing really well, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, doing really well.
I love the look, Mohammed Hijab. This is the traditional look.
Oh, you like it, yeah?
Yeah, I actually do like it.
Yeah. Well,
I have a quick problem. So I clicked on the link and I kind of missed what you were saying because I had like a question. I don't know if there's I don't know if I can like talk about Darwinism.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So
Darwinism,
essentially, I need to like bring something up really quick. So the question that I have, right, is you probably know from reading comments that you have a lot of people who think they know what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So there was this person that he was kind of, wait one sec. So he was basically like arguing, you know, the video that brother Zishan uploaded, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he was kind of like arguing in the comments, and so he was basically saying that, you know how these transitional fossils, right? He was naming the transitional fossils and then saying how, you know, it's very evident that this happened, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't have an answer to that, essentially. So he was saying that, you know, if you deny like that this evolved from this to this, blah, blah, then essentially somehow you're going against, you know, paleontology, anatomy, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, actually. And it's one that comes up often. All you simply need to do is ask them, fair enough, you're giving us one fossil and you're giving us another fossil. What's the evidence that natural selection led this to that? The fossil is not going to be telling you that information. So what is your evidence that this fossil transitioned into this fossil through blind variations being worked on by natural selection? And at that point, usually what happens is they don't understand the question. They actually don't understand the question. And then well, most of them by that time, they realize, okay, so that argument didn't work. But the ones who will try and continue, they'll try and continue from a point of view of trying to say, well, it's not, natural selection is kind of irrelevant. The mechanism is kind of irrelevant. The history is more important. So they'll go to homology. But then again, you can go to homology being the assumption of genetic or an anatomical similarities. As an assumption is fine, but if you're going to say it's actually a conclusion, it's going to end up being a circular argument. So the easiest thing to do is simply to throw it back at them and say to them, what's the evidence for it? In fact, the really funny video, inshallah, I'm going to be making a response to it on my channel. I'm just a little bit worried about the copyright issue on it. It's basically where BBC took a bunch of creationists from UK and took them to America, and they made them meet these biologists and anthropologists and paleontologists and whatnot. And all of them were basically from a Christian background, but then there was one of these Somali akhis, yeah. So he turns up in the thobe, he's there, and when it comes for prayer time, he's like, okay, I'm gonna go off to pray. He's just like a traditional akhi, yeah. And the guy's banging on about fossils and this and that, and all the rest of the creationists, they're sitting there, and they have no idea how to answer this guy. He literally turns around and says to the guy, I think his name's Timothy White, some paleontologist, says to him, what's the evidence? You've shown us all these fossils. What's the evidence that this led to this using natural selection? Automatically, the guy, Tim, you could tell he had no idea how to answer that question. And he tried to just, use certain terms and just try and hoodwink the Somali brother, but it didn't work. And that was classic. I loved it because amongst all of them, all of the people on that show, is only the Muslim who actually asked the right question. All the rest of them were getting bamboozled by all this information. They didn't know how to actually respond. So
I think the interesting thing is I was watching your like one Sapience Institute, you had like this webinar when you were talking about evolution. I think I actually probably like 20 minutes ago, I listened to exactly that. And the thing is so essentially, when someone brings something up like fossils and whatever not, then that the only answer someone has to give to that is, well, how do you know that actually happened due to natural selection? Because if natural selection breaks down, anything else that you derive through that actually also falls apart.
Exactly. And a very simple way of putting it is, before Darwin, we had fossils. Fossils aren't we just discovered them yesterday. No, fossils have existed for a long time. Darwin's the one who came up and said, actually, everything is linked to each other and the mechanism of natural selection. So when you question the mechanism and they have to provide evidence for the mechanism, you've moved the conversation away from just similarities. Because if it's just about similarities, things are similar, let's not even have debate. We all know things are similar. Carl Linnaeus, he put up the classification system, which we still use today. He existed about in the 1700s, right? So we're talking about at least 100 years before Darwin. He was a creationist, but he classified life in terms of things that were similar. So he puts humans with chimpanzees and this type of thing. He makes this entire Linnaean classification. To this day, we use the Linnaean classification, although Carl Linnaeus himself was a creationist and he didn't believe these things went back to a tree of life. So things being similar and being categorized by being similar, whether it's genetic or anatomical, is not new. The Darwinists try and say this as if they've discovered something really amazing. When you pick up the Origin of Species, you see Darwin's main argument is about natural selection. It's not things are similar. Well, we knew things were similar anyway. So the upshot is Darwin's theory is not a theory of similarity. It's a theory of transformation through natural selection. And that's what they need to provide evidence for.
Yeah, that was actually really helpful. I really don't want to waste any time or anything, but I was just trying to understand that you quoted at times Henry Gee, right? I'm not sure what he is. He the senior editor?
Senior editor of Nature, yeah.
So I want to just understand one of his quotes, and that is that it was a debate. I watched your debate it was 3 years ago, something where you quoted him saying that to take a line of fossils, right, and then claim ancestry is actually as valid as telling, scientifically as valid as a bedtime story.
Yeah.
And essentially what I want to understand by that is when I quoted him, this person, and when it comes to, he was bombarding me with questions, to be honest, questions I can't answer, obviously, because I have no knowledge on this topic. Maybe I'll come on another time, ask them, but he kind of was saying that I was taking his quote out of context and he's just talking about direct ancestry rather than general ancestry. So okay. I don't know if that's true.
So you know what you could do? Anytime someone challenges a quote, and they do that a lot, they say, someone can say the sky is blue and the other person says, well, you're saying the person's out of context. What I would do in that case is drop the quote completely, any quote, and just stick to the point. And the point is, fine, you've got this fossil, where's natural selection in this? Which is exactly what the Somali brother did. Yeah. We can argue about, you've taken this quote out of context, you've taken that thing out of context. And the funny thing is, that when you actually show them the context, it gets worse. So in my debate with Aaron Ra, he claimed a book that he hadn't read, that I was taking things out of context. And when I read it in context, it actually got worse for him. Because he said the word genetics is not going to be there, but it was there. So sometimes when these quotes, when you start getting these into this mudslinging match of you've taken it out of context, you're taking it out of context, the easiest thing to do is to simply step back and go to concept. Ignore all the quotes. Yeah. And yeah, that's how I would address it. So Jazakallah khair, Bosnian Muslim.
Yeah, to just end, I just want to say, like, I apologize for speaking a lot about evolution. It's just
no, it's
I just really I don't understand, and the people it's I realize debating with people, it's when you don't have knowledge, it gets very counterproductive, right? Because they kind of make you doubt and stuff. And I'm just trying to I guess step by step understand everything. And so may Allah bless both you brothers and your families, and take care, inshallah.
I mean, do join us, mashallah. Join us every week, so make sure you keep doing
inshallah.
And the other live streams as well. Jazakallah khair, wa alaikum salam. I'm going to go straight to brother.
Camera back.
Oh yes, the brother there. I'm going to go straight to brother Zakaria Ahmed.
Still working.
Zakaria.
Yes, it's still working because we're here. Zakaria Ahmed. We had you on a previous live stream. We didn't get you to join at that time, so I thought I'd give you priority today. How are you doing, brother?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm doing very good. I just finished some biology work, even though I'm not studying biology, but inshallah I'll get through it. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My question, I have two questions, but I'll start with one, which is I started reading Quran, the English translation. I started with Baqarah, and it got me thinking about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how the revelation was miraculous. And a question popped in my head, which I wasn't able to answer, which is, how do I show that Nabi Muhammad didn't copy from the Jews or the Christians? How can I show to other people that the Quran was miraculous, and then Muhammad didn't have connections to the Christians? He did have connections, but he didn't get inspiration from them. That is my first question, and I'll just start with that.
That's a really good question, by the way. That's a common missionary sort of line. How do you address that?
The main thing is that it corrects the Jews and the Christians, and it does so in ways which are verifiable outside of the theological framework. So if you look at, and this is an example we use just to whet someone's appetite, if you like, on this. If you look at, for example, and Abu Zakaria does a great video on this on Many Prophet One Message YouTube. Just look at the field of history, okay, as a standalone, right? And let it adjudicate this discussion in a sense. Because if you look at the historical details of the same story being told in the Old Testament, New Testament on the one hand, and then the Quran on the other, you'll find that the Quran notably corrects the Old Testament on issues of history which only came to light recently. So I'll give you an example. An example of that is the mention of in Surah Yusuf, the mention of the ruler of Egypt being a king, a Malik. Yeah. So this is just one example of many. And if you want to see the other examples, just refer to the video which references the historical differences between the Quran and the Bible, and let that adjudicate that discussion. Another thing really is the theology is simple and pure, whereas the Christian theology is neither of those two things. So, for example, the Quran talks about Tawheed, and it rebukes the Trinity in detail, right? And it rebukes the idea of a deity of Christ. Moreover, you'll find that even in reference to vital attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He corrects the Old Testament understanding. For example, the book of Genesis talks about Allah resting on the seventh day. Very easy example, right? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He created the heavens and the earth, وَلَمْ يَعْيَ بِخَلْقِهِنَّ, and that He did not get tired through the creation of these things. لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. That slumber doesn't overtake him, nor does sleep in Surah Al-Baqarah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the hadith says, إن الله لا ينام, that Allah does not sleep, and لا ينبغي له أن ينام, and or كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that he does that Allah does not sleep, and it's not befitting for him to sleep. So Allah doesn't sleep, He doesn't rest, let alone, wrestle with Jacob and all these things. Obviously, some scholars, let's be fair, say that was an angel and whatever, but still, the discussion about God resting on the seventh day is seen as literal across the board, almost, And there are some metaphorical interpretations here and there, but the old Jews saw it like this, and that He repented to Israel. I mean, there's a verse that talks about God repenting to Israel in the Old Testament, and this shows you the hand of human interpolation, into the Old Testament corpus, such that the tribe of Israel will be prioritized almost in a racially discriminatory way, which we believe is one of the problems of the Old Testament, that it's very exclusive in terms of its messaging. So all of these things is clear. Like, at the end of the day, these are some of the differences, but the similarities are explained by the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has said that these are previous dispensations. We do believe in the Torah and the Injil, and that some of the information of Torah and Injil would have maybe appeared itself in the Old and New Testaments. And so it's not as if, like with Sikhism, modern day Sikhism, it does not affirm the previous scriptures. It doesn't affirm Prophet Muhammad. It doesn't affirm Jesus and Moses in the prophetic sense, that they were actual prophets. Because if it did affirm Prophet Muhammad, then it wouldn't make sense that you have a guru now, a new guru, who's in effect, taking the mantle of a prophet, with revelation and so on. But they don't affirm the Prophet Muhammad, yet you will find in their practices and in their beliefs and in their books, the GGS, so many similarities between the Quran and the GGS. In fact, they even have to do kind of rituals before they touch the GGS, which are ablution type rituals. They do chanting, which is similar to reciting. They have a beard, which is similar to what we do. There's lots of similarity. You cannot deny the fact that there are a lot of similarities between Sikhism and Islam. And as many scholars, comparative religionists, see Sikhism as a kind of amalgam between Islam and Hinduism. But there is no credit given to previous dispensations or prophets, claimants to prophecy in any real sense of the word. So for that reason, I would say that the main thing to show that the Quran has not copied from the Bible is that it corrects it in fields wherein the adjudication is outside, is extra biblical or extra Quranic. In other words, the adjudication is either historical, logical, theological, or otherwise. And with that, we say, well, if it copied it, then it did a good job in correcting it. I mean, it's like selective copying. It copied in the right places. And if that was the case, then the copying was miraculous itself.
Like, how did you know?
Yeah.
My second question is about atheism. I live in Norway, so I tend to deal with Christians and atheists. They are like 50% in this country. My second question is, I know that the logical arguments about the Kalam cosmological arguments lead to a deistic kind of God, but how can we show that Allah is a conscious God who has a will without I don't know how to say, but without making it too abstract?
Well, I mean, look, I don't think that I think you can, on logical grounds, prove that God has a will. And for example, in medieval scholarship, this was referred to as takhsis. This is the argument. Takhsis is the theory of particularization. And the theory basically, or the argument of particularization, takhsis, it goes as follows, and Al-Ghazali mentions this along with a lot of other medieval scholars. They say, look, if you look at the contingent things in the world, they all have an explanation outside of themselves. So, for example, this pink cup. Can you see this pink cup? It has an explanation outside of itself, namely that the materials were created and formatted in a certain or structured in a certain way so as to make it cylindrical and to make it kind of have a surface at the bottom of it so that I can put water inside of it, as is the case, right? So how do I explain the cylindricality of this cup? I can explain it using the materials or talking about the materials, or I can explain this cup outside of itself. Now, there is no necessary way that this cup could have been. There's no reason. I can take this cup out of existence. Indeed, there was a time where this cup probably wasn't even in existence. So this cup is a possible existence. It's not a necessary existence. Now,
What's the difference?
right, it's not a necessary thing. It's a possible thing. Meaning what? It's dependent. It could have not been the case, and it can be taken out. I can destroy this cup. I guarantee you, I can destroy this cup. You know, I can shred it up. I can burn it. I can make it short, vaporize it, whatever it is. Yeah. The fact that I can do that to this cup means that this cup is not eternally necessary. It doesn't have to be the case in pre-eternity or post-eternity. This cup can be destroyed, yeah, and reformatted into something else, vapor or something, yeah. Now, the point is, the fact that I can do this means the cup can be something else, okay? The fact that we have objects in the universe like this jug or this cup, which can be something else, is evidence that it was particularized. So this jug has a particular shape. Are you with me?
Improvement. Yeah.
Right. So if this jug has a particular shape other than another, so it can be this or it can be that, but it is this. This once again, cylindrical jug could have been circular or spherical. Yeah, it could have been a spherical jug, right? But it's actually cylindrical. But I can make it into a spherical jug if I wanted it to be. This fact, and the fact that there's nothing which inheres within this jug which makes it necessarily cylindrical, is evidence to the fact that it was particularized or made in one shape rather than another. Oh, there's no contradiction here, right? Are you with me so far? This thing was made into one shape, whereas it could have been made into another shape. Is there any controversy in this statement?
No.
Is there controversy in this? No. Okay. So, and that's the past tense. I can change this jug into another shape. Yes?
Sir.
Now, if I change this jug into another shape, how have I done so? Using my will, right?
Sir.
Okay. Now, the point is this, is that the universe is one way out of possible alternative ways. There could have been other ways. And there can be other ways where the universe can be reformatted, or parts of the universe, very much like this jug. I can make this into another shape. No one can argue that this jug is necessarily cylindrical.
Sir.
Because if someone foolish enough argues that this jug is necessarily cylindrical, then I can disprove them by changing its shape. Does that make sense? Because if I change the shape of this jug from cylindrical jug into a spherical jug, I have falsified the theory that this jug is cylindrical. Necessary. Because necessary means it has to be one way forever. Yeah? Okay. Now.
But can you give me an example for
Okay,
a bigger version, a universe or a part of the universe?
Look, I'm saying this part of the universe, this jug.
Okay.
No one can argue it's necessarily cylindrical.
Sir.
Because that would mean, necessary means it can't be any other way. But I can make this jug into a spherical jug. That would disprove the fact that it's necessarily cylindrical. I can change it myself with my hand. Yeah? Now, the point is this. The whole universe is one way and not another way. Just like this jug is cylindrical and not spherical. There could have been another shape this jug could have, but it's not. Now, the fact that that is the case, that the universe is particularized in a certain way or specified in a certain way rather than other logically possible ways, yeah, is evidence that there was a particularization or a specification. And now the question is, where did this specification come from? Was it a random generation? Okay. Or, as we would say, was there a specifier? We say, look, just like this cylindrical jug was specified into cylindricality, such is the case with the universe, that it was one way out of a possible set of many different possible ways that it could have been or it can be, and yet it is one way. And this particularization or specification is evidence of a specifier or a particularizer. Okay? And in this case, we say that if there was a specifier or a particularizer, this specifier must have had a choice to make. Because like right now, this cylindrical jug could have been spherical or it could have been cylindrical. I have a choice to make. I can make this into spherical jug, or it can remain as a cylindrical jug. Now, the fact that it is one way and not another means that there was a choice that was made, let's use it in the passive sense, and that a choice actualized. And if it was an actualizer which actualized this choice, which we, with the Kalam cosmological argument, would attribute it to the first cause, that would evidence will, because will is, what is will? Volition or will is when you have choices to make, basically, and you choose one thing rather than another. The fact that this jug is cylindrical rather than spherical is absolute evidence that this jug, there was a choice that was made, that this jug was either going to be spherical or cylindrical, and the choice that actualized was that this was cylindrical, and therefore you can either attribute this to chance, which is, we can have a discussion about the non-existence of this thing called randomness or chance, or to an actualizer or a specifier. We do the latter. In other words, we say it's the specifier or the actualizer that caused the particularization of the universe. So this is the evidence, or this takhsis, this is the evidence of. And Al-Ghazali in his works, he says, he gives an example. He says that, for example, look at the planetary motion. The planets are going one way, right? He said the planets could have been revolving another way. Do you get the idea? He says, so therefore, there was a choice that was made. Either the planets could be going this way, let's say anti-clockwise, but it could be going clockwise, for the sake of argument. Such that if it was anti-clockwise, it would not be impossible. It's still logically conceivable, right? So this doesn't even affect. Someone may say, well, I'm a determinist. I believe everything was the case because of determination. We say that doesn't matter. Because this jug, even if you're a determinist, you cannot argue, okay, that I can't change this jug into another shape. You can't argue that. You can't argue that this jug is necessarily cylindrical. You cannot. You can't. How? I can make it into a sphere. That's it. You cannot argue that. So you have two choices. Either this jug is cylindrical, and this is what, by the way, Al-Baqillani mentions in his Kitab al-Tamheed. Very, very good. And he actually uses the example of a jug, by the way. I think, funny enough, I think he uses the example of a jug. And I think he actually uses the example of cylindricality as well. I can't remember exactly. So it's handy we have this here. He says, look, this jug, there's no property in this jug which necessarily makes it cylindrical, which inheres within this jug, which makes it cylindrical. For if that was the case, it would have been inconceivable to assume a state of affairs where this jug was ever out of cylindricality. And all things which are ever going to be cylindrical should all exist at one time. In other words, there should be no time in which this was not cylindrical or will not be cylindrical. Anyway, so the particularization or takhsis is evidence of a mukhassis or a particularizer.
Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense to you, brother Zakaria. How do you say your name again?
Zakaria.
Sorry?
Zakaria.
Zakaria, but it starts with an S though.
Yeah, my mom chose that.
All right, Jazakallah khair for joining us, brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you guys for everything. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam. So let's go to Jack Munson. Jack Munson.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Can you guys hear me properly?
Yes, we can. Welcome to Sapience Institute Live. What is your question? Where are you calling from?
Perfect. I'm calling from UAE.
Okay,
From
welcome.
UAE, Sharjah. I appreciate the work you guys are doing. By the way, it's really great, and I'm learning a lot from it. My question is about evolution. So I understand that in evolution, animals can they can change from environment to environment depending on the environment that they're in. Yeah, is that correct?
They adapt to the environment. That's the standard Darwinian sort of way of explaining it. But there's a bit more to it. We can also adapt the environment to our needs. So it works in the reverse order, which it really shouldn't from a Darwinian point of view.
Okay, does that apply to human beings? Because there are some, for example, the Eskimos in northern Russia, their noses they're a bit more flattened because the air there is really, it's really cold. Or for example, in Africa, the people there, they're a lot more, they're more muscular, they're stronger, they have a higher respiratory capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So can we say that humans, to a certain extent, can they also, maybe not use the word evolve, but maybe adapt to the environment that they're in to best suit what they're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the words are kind of, I think even the word evolve is okay as long as you define what it means. So we adapt to the environment, we adapt the environment to our needs. However, this doesn't necessarily lead to natural selection being the cause of our traits, our biological or genetic traits. The thing to keep in mind is us being able to adapt to our environment is kind of a trivial historical fact. I mean, if you were to go, say, 1,000 years ago, you were to come to medieval Europe and you were to just say to some peasant who has a pitchfork and is illiterate and stuff, to say that, do you find that human beings adapt to their environment? What you mean by that is that, so for example, if you gave the peasant the example that human beings that had certain genetic, sort of a genetic predisposition to restore more fat, they're more likely to survive than those who don't in colder climates, of course. So if you have, say, 5 children, 3 of them, they have that predisposition to store fat, and therefore they can go on longer in the past without eating, and they go through this deep ketosis where ketones are released and this type of stuff. Are they more likely to survive? Of course. These things are not like, there's nothing special about them. What is interesting is how the Darwinists try and use that to try and explain everything. Say essentially that's how all of life evolved. It was gradual random mutations being worked on by natural selection, and that's how you get from the monad to the man, and you get everything. Interestingly enough, even though it's not sufficient to show that we adapt to the environment to show the Darwinian mechanism is true, what's interesting is the recent publications on niche construction. So anybody who's interested in this topic, I would ask you to go to, say, any scientific journal which covers biology, and just put in niche construction, right? It's a very interesting thing. More and more, obviously, this was known for some time, but the way the literature is being published now on it is like nothing like in the past in terms of its magnitude and its significance. What it's basically going on to show is that humans and other creatures adapt the environment to their needs, as opposed to evolving to the environment. And this type of adaptation, this evolvability, this plasticity that we have is really hard to explain from a Darwinian point of view. So yeah, look that up. That's a very interesting sort of up and coming topic.
Okay, niche with an N-E-E-S-H?
N-I-C-H-E. So like niche, like
okay.
niche construction, yeah.
Okay, cool. My second question is about the scientific narrative.
Right.
So, because I think it's very important, because I think there are a lot of sometimes even like just normal people that they're somewhat interested in being du'at, or they want to like prove Islam. They get sucked into this narrative, and then problems happen. So my question is, are you guys going to make like a comprehensive video about it in the future?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can firstly for the viewers maybe explain, because not everybody's in tune with what is the scientific approach that we're challenging, and what do we have planned for it.
Me? Oh, I thought you were asking them. Yeah, look, I mean, the problems have been, there have been many limitations with the scientific approach, or the scientific miracles approach, and some of them have been philosophical, and some of them have been theological, right? And some of the limitations have involved historical problems as well. That's why initially, when this thing was kind of put forward, maybe in the 80s or 90s, they didn't have the right people, like in my opinion, to spearhead it, because what you really needed was a historian of science. Like, there's a whole history, it's a category of history called history of science, and you needed a philosopher of science, and you needed as well some people that were involved in the science, and you needed a mukhtas or mutakhassis in tafsir. You need 4 types of people, and these are the 4 most important. You need a historian of science, you need a philosopher of science, you need a scientist, and you need like someone who at least have some usul and tafsir and so on. These 4 needed to come to the same table and have a conversation. The lack of or the lack of existence, or that communication did not exist, and so the argument started to have flaws which even a lay person could identify, like a YouTuber could identify them, not even like an academic. Forget about academia. This would not, like, for example, it could never have been known at the time, or it could never have been known at the time. No one said it before. These are the kinds of things that would have been said. Oh, the earth was ostrich egg, and that was, first of all, that's false. It doesn't say that in the Quran. And then that was not known before. Like two false statements. Like, why? Because the person who made this statement didn't have good enough grounding in tafsir, or the Arabic language, or the tafsiri works, and they did not have access to the history of science. They didn't know what the Greeks said before. They didn't know that stuff. So this is an interdisciplinary thing, okay? And that's why it's important that no one person gets involved in this by themselves thinking they can solve it. This is the problem. The problem, and that number one. Number two is the argument itself was flawed. It could never have been known at the time. Like, really, if this was presented in a forget about like a postgraduate thing. If this was undergraduate, like any academic would say, well, that's false, isn't it? Because there's many people that have, like the Greeks, Just look at the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. You had people talking about heliocentrism explicitly and arguing the case for it. Many people believe the earth was round.
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle was making arguments, all kinds of arguments about other things. But there was things that they're not even in the Quran and Sunnah, but are explicitly in the Greek literature. Like, for example, heliocentrism. What are you going to say? That's more superior than the Quran? You know? So it's things like that. You could say, well, these are scientists and this. Yeah, but now you're adding layers to the argument. So the argument has to be tight from the beginning. If you're starting off by saying, well, it couldn't have been known at the time, the argument itself is weak. That's the problem. The argument is weak. Now you have to change your argument. And the argument, we believe, the best argument to make is to say that the Quran, when it's talking about naturalistic phenomena, it's facilitative enough to communicate directly with people from the 7th century all the way through to the 21st century. What's unique about this, and this is where I think the argument gets juicy, and now we start making now we start making active claims, is whereas this is the case with Islam, it's not the case with other religions. So especially ancient religions, and we'll have to define ancient in a very specific way, right? So for example, let's take Judaism or Old Testament or Christianity even, because they have the Old Testament as well. Like, there are things in the Bible which only indicate an ancient authorship. There's no connection at all with what we believe in terms of naturalistic phenomena. For instance, and I give this as a standard example, right? The shape of the earth. I know this because I researched it. I done a bath on it. I wanted to know what the patristic church fathers and the Midrash tradition, what people said about this, about the universe. They had metal plate theory. They had the pillars of the flat earth. When they started in Christianity speaking about the shape of the earth and the universe and pillars and all that, when they got rid of that is when they looked towards the Greeks. It's not because of the Bible and its contents. Whereas bikhilaf al-Quran, because the Quran, there were people doing istidlal with it from the very beginning, saying that the earth is this shape and the universe is like that, and all of that stuff, interpretations of which is correlated with what we have today in the 21st century. So for us now, why this is important, because if someone's going shopping, religious shopping, right, and they want to be faithful to a tradition, and they don't want to metaphorize the tradition, which is what the Christians have resorted to, because they know that if they don't, it's going to be ridiculous. You're going to have a 6,000-year-old universe, and you're going to have no dinosaurs or whatever. Like, you're going to have this stuff, like what the answers in Genesis people say. That, and there's only one ministry that's pathetically trying to, in the Christian world, like in the trying to have a concordance approach. This guy called Hugh Ross. It's really pathetic. It's the most pathetic, meager attempt that I've ever seen in my life for concordism. And even so, that they would admit this themselves. I mean, the Christians, the evangelicals, they'll say this is ridiculous. I mean,
they're trying to reconcile.
Yeah. So this guy called Hugh Ross, he's trying to say the Big Bang is mentioned in Genesis. We can still have, Genesis talks about the Big Bang. Genesis talks about expanding universe. But he's trying to
very similar.
So it's like what? No, but to be fair, like Zakir Naik, when he does all that stuff, he's got some precedent. For, like, at least he's got, it's not ridiculous. When you're talking about Genesis saying that, now, sorry, Genesis says on the second, like, for example, this is, let me give you some interesting points. Genesis says that the light was created on, I'm just trying to get, is it first day or second day?
I don't remember, but the order's wrong, basically.
No. On the fourth day, the sun was created, yeah? The sun was created on the fourth day. I'm trying to memorize, recall the verse. The light was created on the second day, I believe, and then the cause of the light was created on the fourth day, something like that. More problematically, okay, in Genesis chapter 2, it says no plant has sprung up yet. But we already had the plants being created on the fourth day or whatever it was in Genesis chapter 1. Yeah. So much so that these guys, they admit the contradictions in it. Like, for example, Origin of Alexandria. He wrote a book called First Principles. And if you look at the index page of that book, First Principles, yeah? Origin of Alexandria, who's like an ecclesiastic church father, he says, it's a contradiction. He basically admits it's a contradiction. And he says, that's why we have to spiritualize the text. We have to metaphor. And spiritual, in his language, in his hermeneutical language, was meaning metaphorize it, make it into an allegory.
Yeah.
He said the reason why I have to make it into allegory, because otherwise it would be a contradiction. That you have in Genesis chapter 1, the plants were created on the 4th day or whenever it was. And in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 or whatever it may be, it's saying no plant has sprung up yet.
And the other point which I want to put to you, and I think it's very important to bring in here, if you have a book in which you admit that there's metaphors, right? You allow the possibility of metaphors. You can't use the same book to actually then go with a concordant perspective, because it doesn't make any sense.
There's a guy that came, I forget the name of the guy, and I've got these references. One day I'm going to publish them. Yeah. There's a guy who came to Origin of Alexandria. He said, you believe in, because he was a spiritualizer text. He was criticized for over spiritualizing the text. Yeah, he was criticized for that. And because the whole Alexandrian school, you have different schools. The Alexandrian school at that time was into spiritualizing this. Philo, who's a Jew, Clement of Alexandria, Origin of Alexandria, they're all spiritualizing the text or metaphorizing it. So they had a reputation for that. So one guy came to him who was an apologist he wasn't a Christian. And he said, what do you say of those who say that Jesus, the crucifixion, didn't take place, because how can God be crucified like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a reference which basically says that he says, spiritualize it.
Oh.
Because if you're going to spiritualize Genesis, you might as well spiritualize crucifixion.
Airbrush everything.
You're going to spiritualize the crucifixion, the whole deen is gone.
Yeah.
The whole deen is fake. Yeah. So the whole religion is finished. That's why the Christian world has a hermeneutical dilemma right now. Either they spiritualize it and risk spiritualizing the key doctrines, or they uphold literalism, which is what answers in Genesis,
and
whatever.
Contradictions.
And then you have not only serious stuff that would cause huge apostasies, like you have to believe the dinosaurs didn't exist, or that they existed 6,000 years ago, or that all that stuff. You have to believe in that.
Yeah.
But when you go in religious shopping now, you have to choose a religion. Okay, I'm going to choose a religion which says that the universe is 6,000 years old, that the dinosaurs existed, pre-existed with human beings, that the shape of the earth is flat. And I believe that the flat earth movement was from Christians, by the way. Like, I have a whole theory of this. The whole flat earth thing is from Christians, because they know that on literal interpretations that you cannot say the earth is round. Yeah. The whole flat earth thing in the West. So you have that, or you're going to metaphorize it, but risk the problem of metaphorizing the key doctrines. This religion is fake.
Yeah.
So you have that choice, or the choice of you can keep everything literal and basically uphold all the scientific things that you believe in.
Yeah.
Almost all of them without exception. With maybe the slither of the exemption of Adam and his creation with evolution, Darwinian evolution. Which one are you going to do as a aqil person in the 21st century? There's so many barriers to entry when it comes to Christianity. You're either going to literalize it and make the universe 6,000 years old, the earth flat with pillars and so on, no dinosaurs, no humans, or you're going to metaphorize it, run the problem of making the text a metaphor, everything is a metaphor. Khalas, then the crucifixion was a metaphor. Like Origin had to concede to this Greek guy. Or you can just believe in another religion, which basically tells you the truth of the matter is you can believe in everything that you believe in, except for the miraculous stuff, including the creation of Adam, and you don't have to compromise your beliefs, your logical, scientific beliefs. Quite frankly, there's no problem with believing in the 14 billion year old universe or the Big Bang, so long as you believe in Allah. He's the one who orchestrated it. Yeah. So any aqil person, this is very important, would choose Islam if you're really being honest with yourself. And that you have Tawheed rather than the Trinity, the nonsense of the Trinity. There's so many. Yeah, do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So your spirituality and your rationality come together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just
I
writing
don't
notes.
believe I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater in
Yeah.
terms of the scientific miracles narrative, because I do believe there's a nuanced argument you can make. But I just believe that their argument, a lot of it was problematic. A lot of their arguments were problematic, and that's why we were faced with the issues that we were faced with, because people were refuting them with like actual refutations which were true. You know?
Yeah, and it's also kind of like opening up. The way I felt about it afterwards, right, it was kind of like opening up yourself to basically doing an own goal by strawmanning the Quran. Yeah. So you have a book well preserved, which makes really powerful arguments, existential arguments, which is coherent and so on and so forth. And then what you basically do is you're trying to win a point, which is not a point which is going to be so decisive it's going to change the world, but just trying to make a point. But that point strawmans the Quran then makes it liable, not liable, but looks as if it's making it liable to be discredited very easily. And it's really short selling the Quran. It's almost like, you know, I mean, we can't compare anything to the words of Allah, right? But imagine you get a brand new Tesla, right? A brand new, like spanking one of those Tesla Jeeps, right? And then somebody asks you, how is it? And then you say, I didn't switch it on. I didn't turn the ignition. I didn't take it for a drive. But you know what? The cup holder had a nice shape. Like, you'd be like, you bought a Tesla. Why are you talking about the cup holder? It's something so irrelevant, right? So if you really think about what is the point of the words of Allah, it's to bring you closer to Allah, it's to make you think of the hereafter, it's to reform society morally, spiritually, ethically. Yes. And then when you bring in the scientific perspective and you really look at what the purpose of the Quran and why Allah sent the Quran, and you look at how it was used within the context of Islamic apologetics, it didn't make any sense at all. There's nothing. Even if you look at the scientific arguments on a face value point of view, right? Which is, okay, there's some information here which wasn't known before, therefore it's a miracle. What's interesting about this is what's that book by Ibn Taymiyyah? The criterion between the friends of Allah and the friends of Shaitan. Yeah. So even in that book, it mentions that don't just believe in something because it has miracles, right? You got to have, like, the message is important. So, you know, if a book has all these miracles but it doesn't come with the right creed, it doesn't come with Tawheed, essentially, right? You can discard it. It's irrelevant from that perspective, because Dajjal will do miracles and the friends of Shaitan do miracles, right? So the scientific miracles itself was kind of secularizing Islamic spirituality as well, because the people using it, including myself when I used to use it many years ago, many years ago, you completely lose track of what the main purpose of even Islam is and what you're trying to convey. It becomes more like a sort of way of compensating for the lack of productivity in the Islamic world of being ahead in science. It's kind of like, scrap all the hard work. Here's an argument for why the Big Bang's in the Quran. So it's actually quite, it's almost like a post-colonial trauma catch-up type of mechanism going on.
I think it's like funny you say that. There was I think his name is either George Salib or someone like this, who's a historian of science. He actually made exactly the same.
He's very good. He's very good.
Yeah, from Georgetown, I think it was. He actually made exactly the same. Yeah, he made exactly the same remark. He said that it's ironic that Muslims use this at a time where the furthest behind in terms of science.
And he's actually an Arab Christian, but he's very nuanced and very
neutral.
I wouldn't even say neutral. I would say he challenges the Orientalist attacks on Islam, although he's not a Muslim himself. So, for example, the classical narrative, as it's known, the argument that Imam Ghazali took down science, the Islamic orthodoxy took down science, he completely refutes it. I mean, I've forgotten the name of his book, but I mean, he's a really great academic from that perspective. But his point, I totally, concur with. It's just a compensation mechanism.
Yeah, I think it was because of the rise of scientism. I think maybe some people took that approach. But really good answers. I have a last question. It should be a bit short.
Look, what I'm going to do now is, because we've got loads of people waiting, I'm only going to allow one question per person. I think we've answered 2 of yours. If you can come back once we do the other ones. Also, guys, in the private chat, please put down your questions, because what I'm feeling is that we're answering questions which have been answered during this live stream or during the last week's live stream, and some new ones are not. So, for example, brother Danish is asking a question about the harm principle, and I actually want to, hear the question, and I'm sure we're going to get something new here. So, Danish, I'm going to go to you. What is your question about the harm principle?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be with you guys. I've been watching you guys for a really long time. You guys, like celebrities to be like, mashallah, you guys have been doing like really good work. So yeah, basically my like general question, it was kind of a comment, but I wanted to like know, like in your like approach towards liberalism, both of y'all, you usually like go down like the track of like social contract theory, like explaining how like in Brother Hijab's book, he talks about like how human rights are like basically social contract is conducive to the hudud and all of like the penal laws in Islam, etc. Right? So I feel like what are your thoughts on the harm principle? Because when I talk to like most people who espouse liberalism, they go down like a general like harm principle like route where they say like, I'm not harming anyone else, thus I should be able to do whatever I want. I feel like that like kind of like scapegoats like the entire question like at hand, because like I read this like paper by this professor, I forgot his name, at UC San Diego. It was a really good paper, kind of like about how their conception of like the harm principle differs from like John Stuart Mill or like other proponents of liberalism, when they actually have like a prioritization of rights, and it's not like just pure harm principle, because they understand that would like limit liberty much more than like they would like to say. So why do you guys think it would be productive to discuss the harm principle and kind of like expose how hollow it is in like dawah or whatever?
I think we don't necessarily disagree with everything in the harm principle, first and foremost, as Muslims, because we do have a principle within Islam, which is la darar wa la dirar. There is no harming and reciprocating harm. Quran says, وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, and do not let your own hands be the cause of your destruction. Now, what kind of, so that's not harming yourself, and obviously that's in a way it's against the harm principle, because with the liberal conception of it, will conceive of a situation where someone's harming themselves. So yeah, in terms of that, it's exactly what on utilitarianism, what J.S. Mill tried to do, which is to give a basis to his ideology of utilitarianism, and that's what he admits he can't do on an objective level. And so the idea really is putting the burden of proof on them and allowing them, or giving them a chance to believe in to explain what they believe in, and telling us why they believe in what they believe in. Not to say that we disagree with everything they say in terms of the harm principle, or we agree with it. Like in our stance, we believe in parts of the harm principle, we disagree with other parts. So the part we disagree with is that human being, the individualistic part, that he is the best, human being is best to judge his own affairs. We don't believe in that. We believe that Allah is the best to judge his own affairs. Allah knows everything, and he's the most wise and the most knowledgeable, and he's the best one to know our affairs. God is the all-knowledgeable one, is the best one to know our affairs. And so it's that individualistic presupposition, which that we are the best for our own affairs, which we need to question that as well, because the harm principle is not just a principle; it's got presuppositions, which is that we know what's best for us.
Yeah.
How do you prove that? How do you prove that we know what's best for us? And there's even discussions within liberalism which are kind of interesting, like the communitarian individualism discussion, and not only just in relation to rights but responsibilities as well. Like there's obviously Michael Sandel, interestingly, he's written stuff about this. He's coming from a liberal paradigm, really, what we would consider a liberal paradigm. But the question of communitarianism now, to what extent is the community responsible for, or should we be responsible to the community and to what extent does the community have an impact on what we are? We're interdependent, not dependent. We're not independent. And so the starting point is different, because now you're going to have to dismantle this individualistic presupposition, and it's easy to do that when you really think about it, when you interrogate it. But the point I'm making really is this: is that the building blocks are as follows: hedonism, number one. Okay, so hedonism, the hedonistic principle. I mean, John Locke talks about it, but it's something which runs all the way through from John Locke to John Rawls, even though he had a different way of systemizing or kind of coming to a reason why he had this whole abstract thought process. Put John Rawls to the side. But between the two, between John Locke and John Rawls, you have this hedonistic principle. Hedonistic principle is you need to prioritize your pleasures, maximize pleasure and minimize pain. That's what it is. That's in the form of utilitarianism, and then it's kind of refined by the harm principle. First thing is, how do we prove that the hedonistic principle is true? Why is it true? This is what John Stuart Mill tried to do, what many of them try to do, and they all stumbled with this. They all fumbled with this. And I've got, you said you read my book. I've actually written something you can download for free called The Problems of Liberalism. You can download that free. And it goes through, why it is and how it is that they stumbled with this. So that's one thing. The other thing is the individualistic presupposition with the harm principle, that we know what's best for us, which is now being questioned from within with communitarianism. And then finally, we're not going to disagree with every part of the harm principle, because we believe in a kind of harm principle. But beautifully, I mean, a lot of the usuli scholars in Islamic jurisprudence, they talk about when they talk about harm and stuff, it's very interesting how they put it. They say, let's start with the harms to the dunya and the akhirah. Let's prioritize ukhrawi, dunya and ukhrawi, like the dunya and the hereafter harms. But that's metaphysical. That's something that these people are never gonna, because it's almost a materialistic presupposition there as well. It's a secular materialistic presupposition. We have a religious eschatological presupposition with, there's a hereafter, there's this and that. So everything is different. And but if they insist on their morality being true, they have to be able to demonstrably prove every part of what they believe in, from the hedonistic principle to the individualistic presupposition to the harm principle itself. All of those things are evidence, and they know it. And that is the reason why John Rawls, by the way, after a long, but how many hundreds of years between John Locke and John Rawls? We're talking about 300 years, something like that. Why have they continued to change the way? Why have liberal theorists, theoreticians change the way they basically have a theory for justice? Now this John Rawls has a book called The Theory of Justice, and he starts from a different starting point. Why did he feel the need to do that if liberalism already had the answers? You see, if the hedonistic principle and the utilitarianism and the harm principle was all good enough, why did John Rawls, after he's a liberal, right? And he's the last contributor, major contributor of the liberal tradition, huge, obviously there's people that came after him, but he's one of the only ones that you could do a PhD on, let's say, put it that way. And he changed the whole mechanism. If you go and research John Rawls, he has an entire different system of finding out what's right and what's wrong, in a sense, than the hedonistic and utilitarian ways of past. And in fact, he actually criticizes the utilitarian ways of John Mill and so on. And so if he did that, he must have known that there were some issues in proving what he's trying to prove. But yeah, this is from a theoretical perspective. And so bring people into that and let them know that it's completely their whole ideology, their dominant ethic of the West is balanced on a spider's web.
Exactly. What I've noticed is people free ride on something is kind of undisputable. When you hear the harm principle, do everything except for harming someone else, it's so attractive that they go towards it, but they don't understand that the whole discussion about morality itself is what constitutes as harm. And for us as Muslims, we our scholars, our people in jurisprudence decide what is harm and what isn't. That's something within the fold of Islam. But like the whole question is like, what is harm, what isn't harm, and that kind of gets circumvented like when people impose.
Add to that, it's beautiful because I was reading something in Mustasfa Abu Ghazali, and he in his fasl on maslaha, he actually goes into so much deep details. Like, wallahi, all these conversations they're having in consequentialism now, and liberal consequentialism, and all that stuff they're having today, like in the last 100 years, have been had. Like, for example, he mentions a tatarrus, which is the idea of shielding yourself with innocent bystanders in war, where you'd be beaten and this, and they go into so much details, and that's why I believe, like, sometimes people think that Islam is categorical and absolute in terms of its morality, but I disagree with that. It is obviously objective, but it's I believe in something called, and I've mentioned this in some of my works, Sharia consequentialism, and that is usul fiqh basically. فَمَنِ اضْطَرَّ فِي مَخْمَصَةٍ غَيْرَ مُتَجَانِفٍ لِإِثْمٍ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِ. The Quran says whoever is compelled in and so on, like, and or to eat pork or to drink alcohol, then but that itself is a principle, which is الضرورات تبيح المحظورات, which is that certain darura, which is necessities, can make something halal haram and haram halal, and all of these things are interplaying with each other, and a lot of it is hinged on darura and harm and physical harm and so on and so forth. All of this have been discussed by our scholars in the past, and I find it really interesting that they're catching up to this. But it's not books of usul, man. It's really interesting.
I like the term Sharia consequentialism. I think that needs to be popularized. Does that answer your question, brother Danish?
Yes, completely. Thank you for answering this my question.
I think I went everywhere, man, and this is because it's something I spent a lot of time thinking about. So I obviously had a lot to say about it. But yeah, if for more references, because I've actually written something on it, maybe like 6,000 words or something, I don't know. Yeah, I've written something. Just write my name on Google and write "problems with liberalism."
Okay,
and you'll get the references there.
Yeah. All right, Jazakallah khair, brother Danish. Next, we're going to go to brother Sean Ahmad.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So, just letting you guys know, I'm speaking from Canada. And yes, your work has made it here. So thank you for all the hard work you guys have been doing. Appreciate it so much.
Thanks so much, man. We appreciate it.
So my question is, I have a few. I know you guys only want one, so I'll just go with the one I really want to know about. I'm very interested in Prophet Adam, peace be upon him. I'm very interested in evolution in that regard. How was he made? I'm curious. The Quran definition of what a human being is, why does it not incorporate Neanderthals, for example? Why is it that Homo sapien is kind of what we go with, but primitive sort of primates are not considered a part of that?
Yeah. So there's a few ways of looking at this question. So when we take a purely scientific perspective, when they say human, they're including Denisovans, Homo naledi, Homo erectus, everybody, right?
What's that first one called again?
Denisovans, right?
Right.
Denisovans, and they've all these different species of hominids. The thing is, the Quran, we can only go by, like Allah says He creates that which you know, that which you don't know. I mean, Allah says He creates that which you don't know. The thing is, the Quranic definition of insan, of human, is the children of Adam alayhi salam. So and automatically when we start saying humans, and the scientists are saying humans, which mean two different things. So from their perspective, it's far broader, right? Human beings would go back a long time than what the Islamic definition allows. Now, why is it that they aren't called insan by Allah, although they're creations of Allah? So Homo erectus, I mean, I covered this previously, how did Homo erectus make wudu or whatever, right? That's just something which, from a Quranic perspective, is just I mean, I don't really see how we can address that. It's just simply what Allah revealed. So it's kind of like, why did Allah reveal 5 prayers rather than 7? I mean, it's just what Allah willed. So if Allah has just described the children of Adam alayhi salam as insan, and why didn't Allah use this for, say, Homo naladi, right? Which was, it had burial sort of traditions, and you could say tool use and other sorts of things. What's the reason behind that? I don't know. Although there's some interesting things I've been thinking about over the years as I've been looking into these hominid creatures, which is that, and you probably know this, brother, about language, right? And how Allah says to Adam alayhi salam that, he taught Adam alayhi salam the names of all things, right? What's beautiful about this is when you look at the history of humans from a scientific perspective, not our definition is only Bani Adam. They actually categorize all these hominids, and then you have the cognitive revolution with language, which they make as a point of inflection in which intelligence goes up, then you get civilization, you get culture, you get technologies, all these things. And I was thinking, subhanAllah, it's almost like Allah's teaching us in this modern times that He could have made us like Homo naladis, right? Allah could have made us really.
Can I add a question to that too?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, history has history of civilization is probably about 10,000 years. Max, and with that, we're actually we're stretching it, to be honest. Indus River, Mesopotamia, 6,000-7,000 years?
I mean,
let's add a 3,000, 4,000.
Yeah, so for example, Jericho, we could arguably say is the oldest. Yeah, civilization is a bit hard to define, but you get your point. Yeah, about 10,000 years.
So they say that the first human being, humans, Homo sapien, right? So what we are.
Yeah, that's hundreds of thousands.
300,000 years.
Yeah.
So between the first Homo sapien and human civilization is like
290,000. Yeah.
What were they doing for them?
See, this is the thing.
What were they doing?
This is the thing I was really thinking about, right? Language, how language changed everything. Now they give it around the year 70,000 years ago is when this cognitive revolution was supposed to have happened. But you see, these numbers get revised. But since language is supposed to be that point of inflection, it could have been closer to the 10,000 year mark, right? In terms of the effects of that. It's just one thing if you think about it, language, but the impact in terms of everything, in terms of writing, in terms of technology, culture, communication, it's just, it's just mind blowing. But one thing I always think about is, one of the teachings from the Sunnah and one of the teachings from the Quran is to always look at people who have less than you, right? And to always look at, in terms of knowledge of Islam or these types of things, look at people obviously better than you. And we can trivialize our blessings if we look at always people who are richer than us. Yeah. Likewise, whenever I think of these hominids, I literally think, subhanAllah, it's almost like Allah's teaching us through all these paleontologists that if He wanted, we could have been like that. We could have had short, brutish, nasty lives. Like, Hobbes said, if you really think about it, look how comfortable our lives are. Like, we're sitting here on a live stream, talking, discussing, like, he's not grunting. He's like, he's using language.
Do you know what it is, man? Like, do you know this whole language thing? We talk about the why and how we can ask why and all the morality and all that distinguish human beings from other animals. This language thing, people don't like. When you start to delve into it, it's so understated. Language, we're talking about, I don't know how many human languages there are. It has allowed us to do things. It allowed us to accumulate knowledge, like from one generation to another generation to another generation to another, so we can store knowledge and pass it on to the next generation.
Sorry, just on that point, storing information culturally. Yeah, I want everyone to understand this. Yeah, when you come into the world, you've got hundreds of thousands of words and cultures and social norms, and they've not been preserved on something, right? They're actually in culture, and it's really interesting. It's like it's like a vertical inheritance that you get from culture, and without language, none of these things would be possible.
And it's crazy because, like, I've got a question for you, and once again, this is like layman questions, not some stupid atheists in there say, "Oh, look at all that." We ask some good answers. Obviously, you're doing your PhD on these things. So I'm asking a question I had in my mind.
Yeah.
If language can be evolved. Like, okay, not even language. Let me rephrase the question. If noises that animals make to signal to one another, which we see in the animal kingdom, yeah, can evolve to a complex use of language. Okay. My question is, why are we not seeing that in other species, and why have we never seen that in other species?
Well,
is there any explanation for that?
I would actually challenge that question.
Go on.
Yeah. So I would say, rather than saying why, because what you're doing is you're mixing two different issues. You're mixing the issue of the origin of language with human exceptionalism. These are two different things.
Right.
So, for example, do animals have language? Yes. We could argue with a certain definition of language, they have language.
No.
Your real question is about human exceptionalism. So let's separate the two questions. Humans have exceptionalism. We do.
By the way, sorry,
Yeah.
do you know what, when you say the definition of language?
Yeah.
When I'm using language, I'm also about communication methods.
Yeah, you're talking about. Yeah,
I'm talking about complex systems of grammar, syntax, semantics, all of that.
Yeah.
Grammar, syntax, semantics.
No, but your question is not about origin language. Your question is about human exceptionalism.
Yeah. So
and that's a separate question for Darwinists. Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm taking your question and I'm separating into not one problem for the Darwinists, but two. One is the origin of language.
Yep.
One is why human beings are exceptional.
Okay.
In terms of their language, right? Yeah. So let's deal with one at a time.
Okay.
The first thing to know is, from a Darwinian point of view, what would be the function of language? Like, what would they say? Survival, exactly. Yeah. So in the Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins says that the function of basically language is is for deception of the signal receiver by the signal sender.
Right. So
essentially, it's about, what are the fitness advantages of communicating in this particular way? So language is supposed to be something that helps our survivability and this type of thing. However, there's a problem with that immediately. People who are generally literate, people who are generally not literate, everyone's literate now, but even in the past, and people who are good at communication and people who are good at reading and writing and this type of stuff, they actually had a lot less kids, right? And that's a historical fact. So it doesn't go in line with, okay, so if language evolved for that purpose, then people who are actually good at communication actually have less children, which wouldn't make any sense. And also, people who are more intelligent, and it's a bit of a segue, a bit of a tangent, but people who are more intelligent actually have less children as well.
There's something else that just comes to my mind. And once again, it might be a layman question, right?
None of these are laymen so far, by the way. But, you keep saying it's layman.
No, because the thing is, this language is in order for it to be efficacious, it has to be with a group of people, at least two or more. Let's say what. Well, but it has to be with a group of people. Yeah. What I'm saying is, how do you get from noises for communication purposes to complex language? Syntax, semantics, grammar.
Okay, good. But no, okay.
When in order for such thing to be constructed, you need two or more actors to work in synchronization with one another.
Yeah.
How does this kind of evolution work?
So now what you've done is you raised the issue of the original language, and you raised the issue of human exceptionalism. You're raising a third issue, which is known as the aggregate problem.
And a third one. I'll give you a fourth one as well.
Before you do that,
because do you know what I find confusing, let's say, language is not a biological trait.
It's a cultural inheritance.
Like, language is not, you can't argue that, because I've heard this before, right? Language is evolved. Okay, in one usage of the term, but it's not something like skin.
No, it's not. It's not, but we have the cognitive architecture for it.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
basically what
you have something moving from simplicity to complexity, which is language.
Yeah.
And in order for that to be the case, two more actors have to be actively, creating systems.
Yeah. So look,
how does that happen?
Yeah. So this is a really good thing, and so we've gone from the origin of language, which you raised, to human exceptionalism, which is another problem, to another problem which they term the aggregate problem. The aggregate problem is the complex sociological phenomena of language and transmission and grammar and all these things. How can that break down to individual level strategies, individual level things.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's an emergent property. Yeah,
Right.
that's known as the aggregate problem.
Right.
Yeah. So they don't really have a solution for it.
They don't.
But
we do.
that,
Because here's what I'm saying. You have this complex problem, and you have to, like, seriously, a theory that has to come into that to explain all these problems is a lot. We have a very simple verse in the Quran. I said, sorry, the other one which says that فعرضهم على الملائكة فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين. Like, you know, there was a learning process that Allah taught وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها ثم عرضهم على الملائكة. That he taught Adam the nouns or the names, all of them, or not all, every single one of them, but a lot of them, and then عرضهم على الملائكة, and then Adam then communicated them to the angel or the angels. فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء. So there was input.
Yeah.
Okay, this makes a lot more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Input, output, correction. That's how learning works.
Yeah.
That's exactly how learning works.
Yeah.
Look, if you have something now, look, you've got two options. You've got the religious option, which is basically telling you that language was inherited in exactly the same way as software is built.
Yeah.
Like, we have software and computers, right? So how does that work? You have input, output, correction. That's how it works. Input from Allah, straight to the first human, output to the angels, and then correction. That makes more sense than anything they can come up with. I'm sorry, it does.
And you know, there's something really, really beautiful about that particular. And I just, this isn't planned, but I'm going to put this question to Hijab, right? So the angels, when Allah creates Adam alayhi salam, the angels look at Adam alayhi salam, and what do they say? They say that
tell me the name.
No. That's later.
Right.
The first thing is that Allah created this creation when we sanctify you, and basically the angels are saying, would you create one that sheds blood?
Yeah.
Now, that was the first human. Right. So what was going around shedding blood before that looked like a human?
Well, some say the jinn, and some say the bun. Like, you know, a tabari is the bun.
No, but okay, I know about that, but
that's, by the way, that's quite interesting, because you know this whole bun thing. Tabari mentions it, I think, in his tafsir. Yeah. On the A of this, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to check this bun out actually, because it's very interesting. He said that there was a creation before human beings called bun,
which looked like humans,
which were like human beings,
yeah,
and that they were fought each other.
Yeah. Now here's what's very interesting. Yeah, you see, when we look at when the angels are basically looking at Adam alayhi salam, you have to remember they're looking at Adam alayhi salam, and then they're saying that would you create one that sheds blood? So obviously they're referring to something that looks like him, not looks like an elephant or something. Yeah.
Right.
And that sheds blood. Now what's interesting is when we look at the hominids previously, they were very violent, right? They were at each other. Their cranium, their their skeletal features and all these things, they literally look like it was almost like, you know, if you take a really tough looking human, you know those people that almost feel like their skull is almost twice the size of a normal, like these were really tough things. And there was a lot of battles, there was a lot of we shouldn't say battles, raids, killings, snatchings, there's a lot of bloodshed. So it makes kind of sense that the angels are saying, you know, would you create one which, you know, sheds blood?
Sure.
And then here's the thing. Allah distinguishes and answers them. And what's their contention? Their contention is violence.
Yes.
Their contention is violence. What does Allah answer? What makes this creation different? What makes this creation different? Language. And the language, when you're teaching a language, you have to teach concepts with the language. So each word comes with a type of concept. So cup, right? It's not just a word, it's actually a concept. So some scholars say when Allah says he taught Adam the names of things, the word, the name encompasses concepts as well, not just names, which is obviously it is an extension of that.
Yes.
Now, by human beings communicating, they actually have a lot less violence, right? That's just the standard thing. The other thing is, you take and this biologist said this, right? You take 150 chimpanzees and you stick them on a plane. They're all sitting in a plane, and you put them there. What do?
Nothing. Scream.
They will scream and shout and rip off each other's genitalia and just go mad.
You've been watching a lot of those documentaries.
So anyway, and Joe Rogan goes crazy about what chimps would have done. Yeah. Now you take 150 strange humans and you stick them on a plane. They'll put on their seatbelts. They'll sit there, right? They'll act totally different, right? Now, what makes us different?
Language.
No, language is definitely there. It's also temperament and these types of things. But we're totally sociologically different to what is supposed to be. Oh, we're just 1% off. Oh, we're so close. We are chimps. We're just more sophisticated. Well, clearly not. Clearly, there's something a lot more going on. So there's also something else that I keep thinking about. That it's interesting that all of these discoveries are coming now. They didn't come in the 17th century. They didn't come in the 16th century. They didn't come. And this is a century in which not only are we more affected by fitna in terms of material wealth, Allah's also giving us more reason to be grateful for what we actually have. And one of the things, because I do this a lot, I have to look into all of these hominid species and the way they lived. I honestly think if someone just spent a little bit of time looking into how these hominids lived, they would be grateful. The poorest human being on earth would be grateful for everything they have. Our lives are so much more comfortable than theirs. But they're constantly worried about being attacked and killed. Imagine living your life like that.
Bro, imagine, to be honest, a human being in the jungle, it doesn't have language, it doesn't have guns, no weapon, nothing.
It's a Hobbesian war against all.
Imagine that, bro, man. Imagine you have to go against the lion. You know what I'm saying? You're not gonna
or even...
how are you going to be the king of the jungle with your frame of your body? And this bloody lions in there.
Even, this is very interesting.
If you're ignoramus,
that
doesn't know how to speak.
Some animals, they actually can actually communicate over huge distances, like whales and these types of things. But despite their huge brain sizes and the fact that they can communicate over these large distances, their communication and everything that they do is still very primitive. I mean, what are they going to talk about? Food or safety or these types of things. But if you look at humans, a lot of our discussions are not to do with food and survival, right? They're not to do with reproduction and survival. A lot of it's to do with concepts and ideas and ideals and morals and ethics and these types of things.
Completely different thing. I think it's an insult when they compare us to monkeys. Well, what are you talking about? Genetics? Is that all? That's genetic reductionism. So,
genetic reductionism. Because what they're basically telling us is, look, we're just a bit more sophisticated than a chimp, yeah. So give it the ability to have sex, give it the ability to have a banana and feel a bit safe. It'll be happy. But honestly, you take a human being and you give them the ability. I mean, technically, if I had
a monkey as a pet, I put it in the same room as a dog.
Bro, if me and Mohammed Hijab right now, if we were truly Darwinists, I wouldn't be sitting here nearly 1 o'clock in the morning talking about this topic. He would be at a sperm bank waiting, queuing. I would be somewhere hunting. We'd be acting in a Darwinian perspective, just spreading our genes and doing these types of behaviors. No one acts like that. Yeah. And the reason why behavior is very important is because all of the rest of the things that the Darwinists say we can't really test ourselves. But behavior is something we can test ourselves, and we know that actually it doesn't fit the Darwinian picture at all.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. I have one more question.
Overdid it with you, man. I got one more question.
It's all good. No, it's funny because you guys went to language and
when I said Mohammed Hijab outside the sperm bank, no one laughed, but actually that's the thought. That if you really think about it, you go to a sperm bank and you just literally just go in there, keep giving your sperm. They keep making these babies, and your genes are being spread everywhere. No one
spends. Mohammed Hijab gets paid too.
see.
But I'll be honest, there was one time I was not doing.
Oh, bro,
no,
let me. Next
let me
question.
There was one time where like I wasn't making a lot of money, and I was like, I had to make some money.
Bro, should I mute it?
No.
I knew it.
There was these people that used to call me for medical trials. Not like they call me for medical trials and that, and I used to call them back and see, okay, what's the risks and whatever. And one time they used to tell me text message and whatever, and no, I didn't do the sperm thing. Obviously, but there was one time I actually went ahead with like a medical trial, and
Really?
yeah, I went to the hospital and everything. I filled out the form. I said I want to do it, and I went to the hospital. There was a hospital. They were doing it in a hospital. And then I just looked at the people there and I just turned back and went to
Some of these have gone wrong, by the way, these medical experiments. They did one in Northwick Park Hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it caused serious issues.
Yeah.
So I forgot what your original question was, but Jazakallah khair for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Next, Jazakallah khair, brother Sean Ahmed. Next is Ayman Al-Madi. Ayman Al-Madi, welcome to Sapience.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
You guys hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for what you're doing, guys. It's really a pleasure being here with you guys.
Likewise.
I had a question, but the sperm blank discussion seems a little bit more interesting. So my question basically is just about a methodology with which I'm calling from Morocco, by the way, a methodology in which we can deal with the contradictions between science and Quran or Sunnah. Because I have a lot of people in my family that say that, well, this verse contradicts science, and so how can we deal in a general way with those types of questions?
It's not a general answer. It requires interdisciplinary study. It requires you to look and do the bahth, unfortunately, and actually the research and check out. And obviously that's what Sapience Thoughts is. I mean, we've got like 10 more videos to film, 10 more videos to come out, and then really we should be covering everything out there. I think there's about maybe 7, let's say 70, but really it's about 35 major contentions. But then they can be subdivided into about 70 that these anti-Islamic apologists have, and you just have to know the answers for them. And that's what we're doing. Sapience Thoughts, we're already going through the majority of them, and by the end of maybe 3-4 weeks' time, all of them will have been released.
Yeah.
So I just have one in particular, because one of my family members keeps saying that it's about قوله تعالى الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش, the 6 days thing. And so how do you know how can I answer this type of question?
I think there's a video on this.
Yeah,
right?
I've done a video on that. Yeah,
it's on Sapience Thoughts. You can watch a good video on this, inshallah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No worries.
I write my name and say Sapience Thoughts and put it like that.
So the last question is going to be for Durban. Dulban. We actually started this live stream late. We're going to try and start it earlier next week, inshallah, around 8.
It seems like more people came on board now.
Yeah, and even the views are not too bad there. But we're going to have to end because it's nearly 1 o'clock here in the UK. And yeah, so Dulban, please state your question and where you're calling from. Welcome to Sapience Institute live.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes, we can, brother.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So, Akhi, it's for Hijab. I'm from Germany, actually. So, my question goes like this. It's about DMT. So, basically, everyone who experiences such kind of experiences like DMT, for example, always come up with some fabricated kind of belief, right? So, for example, Joe Rogan, Conor Murphy, or some other people, so they never go the path of monotheism. They go actually the path of, much more God and stuff like this. So what is your response to it? I know you didn't take it yourself, but how can we tell them to go to the right path to Islam in those kind of situations?
So
I hope you understand my question well. If not,
the thing is, when they make any report, when they're reporting of something, right? What are they reporting of? They're going to report of seeing images of whatever images they see, like a monkey, this or I don't know that, or geometric shapes, whatever they see, right? The fact of the matter is that whatever they claim to see or hallucinations is coherent to some extent. Like for example, if they say, "I see geometric shapes," so you can make sense of what you see. Now, if you can make sense of what you see, now you're talking about a reality which is outside of physical existence, which feels as real as physical existence, which has coherence. How can you explain such reality on materialism? This for me, the DMT thing is actually a shot in the foot for them. That's why I feel like the DMT thing, the psychedelic experiences, if you really think about it, right? If you're talking about experiencing coherent experiences outside of material realm, which feel as real as the material realm, it must be that consciousness has some kind of different interaction with human beings. It's not simple as, it's all that we see in the physical existence is what there is. I don't see how that does anything to discredit religion. In fact, it does a lot to credit it, because it's showing you there's a whole world out there that you can't make sense of unless you start invoking metaphysics, basically.
Right, but it gives credit to religion per se, but how can we use this energy of those people to give them the pathway to Islam? You know, how can we argue for Islam in such situations?
I would just remind them that, you know, the Prophet Muhammad, he, as I did with Conor Murphy, I had a discussion with him, like he associated sleep with death. He says that the sleep is the brother of death. And so when you lose consciousness in sleep, consciousness travels to a different location. Literally, your soul goes to a barzakh, at a different place. It goes to the same place where it sleeps than what it does when it dies, which shows you that, which is the barzakh, right? This place. This makes sense of the experiences. It makes sense of how consciousness, you can be trapped in another realm and seeing different things. But it also makes sense of the fact, or it points to the direction of materialism not being, once again, the five senses and what we understand through them, physicalism, materialism, is not the only reality that is out there. And there is no explanation in any other religion that explains another realm in the same way that Islam does when it comes to sleep and loss of consciousness and connecting with death. I actually was watching something today with this guy. His name is, that guy I refuted. What's his name? Tyson. What's his name again? Tyson. The guy, the astrophysicist.
So,
sorry. Yeah, he was being interviewed by Larry King, I think his name is. And Larry King said to him, "What's going to happen?" He was scared, like it's as if he was going to a priest or something, and he's asking him what's going to happen after death. And he said that, well, this is so, like, I thought about this guy, and I thought this guy doesn't even think properly, because he said, well, you didn't exist before, and what's going to happen after death is that you're just not going to exist like you did, like how it was before. So he's trying to say that just as you didn't exist before, that same experience of non-existence is going to repeat itself. But that's a false analogy. I thought to myself, is that guy so dumb to not realize? But we never had an experience of a situation where we were conscious,
and then
it's
such a disanalogy. But you know, the funny thing about it is, if you were nothing and you're brought to life and you become nothing, the chances of you being brought to life are more now, because it's already happened before. So it's a terrible analogy. You need to make a video on that.
I thought about making a video on it, but then I just thought, I mean, look, I thought to myself, look, it's a simple thing. He's saying that you didn't exist, so you have experience of not existing and then existence. But we have no experience of existing and then not existing.
Yeah,
it's so easy.
Yeah,
but there's more to it than that. I'll add to it the Islamic argument. The only time we've lost consciousness is in sleep. And every single time we lose consciousness, we regain it. That's a scientific point.
Allahu Akbar.
Every single time.
Allahu Akbar.
So why do you think that you're going to continue losing consciousness, or that you're going to lose consciousness and not regain it again?
Absolutely.
Makes no sense.
Just on that point, my battery is gonna, lose its juice very soon, so we may lose this live stream. But Jazakallah khair, brother Dulban, for joining us on this live stream.
Barakallahu feek for the answer. Sorry.
Yeah, may Allah bless you. Jazakallah khair. So please, everybody, join us next week for the same. Inshallah, we're going to be back probably around 7-8 o'clock UK time, and going live as we usually do for about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. It's about an hour, 45 minutes. Not bad. About 1 o'clock in the morning. But yes, please do join us. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.